with our buddy Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee. Chris Biderman is 1-for-1.
Hey, man. That was the big free agent
The
acquisition.
big Chris Biderman covering the Sacramento Kings a little bit more in depthly, along with the work that JA does over there at the Sacramento Bee. And man, Biderman don't know nothing about losing.
No.
His football teams go to the NFC. I mean, I don't know if Chris Biderman is the key to success, but his football teams go to the NFC Championship, and the basketball teams he cover go to the playoffs.
You should ask for an extension right now.
Right now.
Wait, you're telling me this doesn't happen every year?
No. This is, believe it or not, Chris, this is a bit.
Damn, that's wild.
This is a bit new. What did you think last night? But obviously you've been in Sacramento. You've been around Sacramento. You've been around Kings fans for a long time. This is your first year, on the road with them and covering them the way that you do. Did last night have any impact on you? Give you any feels?
I mean, it was just cool to see it all kind of finally happen. Like, I think, there's, and I don't mean this, and try not to take this the wrong way, but I think there's a disconnect between the way the players feel about it and the way everybody else feels about it. And I think the players, frankly, are kind of tired of talking about it. Right.
Yeah,
but I think overall that's kind of healthy, because one of the things that I think stands out about this team in reference to like its history is that you kind of need a bunch of new guys who aren't saddled with the history, right? Like there's De'Aaron Fox and there's Rashawn Holmes, but a lot of the other guys, and Harrison Barnes to a certain extent, but there's a lot of other guys who've like, it doesn't really mean a whole lot to, Keegan Murray or Kevin Huerter or Malik Monk. Like they think it's cool, obviously, and they really appreciate the fans and the way they support the Kings, but they didn't come here like burdened with the weight of 16 years. And I think that's kind of important, right? Because if you were, if you had a bunch of guys who were just all a part of that losing, like it would be so hard to come back and, and try to lose that feeling and then overcome what they've achieved now. So like, ultimately, I think the fact that there are so many players that are disassociated with that losing, and we talked about it before too, just kind of like they have a winning attitude. A lot of these guys, like that was really important in what Monty McNair brought in. These guys have a winning attitude and are not associated with the 16 years. They didn't necessarily feel the same pressure as maybe other people within the organization. Certainly the fans thought about it a lot. Like, so that's one thing that stood out to me. Just there's kind of a necessary disconnect between the players and the history. And to me, that was kind of important in the Kings being able to overcome that playoff drought and getting there, was just to disassociate with like bringing in new faces, new players, new attitudes that aren't super connected to that losing culture.
That's a great point, man. And it starts at the top, right? And I won't go to the owner, but Monty had nothing to do with anything that happened years prior, eras prior, anything like that. He was a complete outside hire, and he treated, I feel like, to your point, Chris, he treated this whole thing like an outside hire. He's like, I'm not really worried about 16 years. Like, I think Mike Brown is best. I think trading Tyrese Halliburton is best. I think going to make this Keegan Murray selection is best. Like, I can't worry about all that other stuff because I'm just got here. All I can do is what's best. And I think that's where a lot of this stuff starts from is Monty McNair and what he's been able to do since he's got here.
Yeah, and I heard you guys talking about De'Aaron Fox before I came on. Like, I first started writing about this team last year, and my whole thing, my big question I had was like, can De'Aaron Fox be the centerpiece of your franchise if you're going to be a winning team? And just looking at like the information that we had, like, there wasn't a whole lot there. Like in my mind, I was like, is this like West Coast Bradley Beal, like somebody who's going to put up numbers, but not really be part of a winning solution? And then when Monty McNair made the trade and kept De'Aaron Fox and traded away Tyrese Halliburton, it's like, all right, that's a pretty big bet. And we don't have a whole lot of data that says De'Aaron Fox is this guy. And I think one of the things, I mean, from my perspective, that's really stood out this year is Fox taking it to that other level, Fox being a part of the winning solution and just elevating himself to not only being a guy who can score, but a guy who can be a winning player and be a clutch player. and be, frankly, like a team player. Like, I think there were questions just about, energy and effort defensively, right? And like decision making late in games. And Mike Brown it seems like he's been sort of the perfect guy for De'Aaron. And I think you got to give Monty McNair a lot of credit for that, because, Monty McNair not only hired Mike Brown, but he saw that in De'Aaron Fox and was like, all right, this is a guy that's on this roster as I take this job, and like, he's going to be the guy I build around. And it took some foresight to sort of see this from Fox, to be able to see that, no, we can build around this guy. And so I think that was a really big decision on Monty McNair's part. And it took a lot for De'Aaron Fox to sort of evolve into that upper echelon, like all NBA type player. And he's going to win the Jerry West Clutch Player of the Year award, which signifies that. But to me, like, I gained a ton of respect for De'Aaron Fox this year by the way he's elevated himself and the way he's embraced Mike Brown and the way he's sort of become a winning player, not just, an empty calorie stats guy on a losing team. Like, he really can be part of the solution on a winning team.
And I think I said this earlier. It's just so much credit for where this team is. Obviously, Monty McNair, De'Aaron Fox, Mike Brown, and how, guys, sometimes it's not just a great coach. Sometimes you need the right coach in the right situation. And I think Mike Brown is a great coach, by the way, but this was the perfect situation, Chris, for him to return to basketball after a lengthy absence as a head coach. Obviously, he's been with the Golden State Warriors for a while, but this was the perfect situation for him to return to.
Yeah, and it's not only like a schematic thing, right? It's about the day-to-day operation, the messaging, the way you talk to your team on a daily basis, the way you schedule. Like, there are practices where Mike Brown's just standing on the sideline and Jordy Fernandez is running practice, right? Or like, there are other assistants who are the voice that day so that the messaging doesn't get stale. Like, they switch that up pretty frequently. So it's not just Mike Brown hammering them over the head, like, hey, defensive intensity, hey, rebounding, hey, all this stuff. Like, they switch it up, and Mike Brown does a really good job of delegating all that. And those are the types of things that he's talked about learning from, like Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich, just the messaging and the being able to communicate with your players over an 82 game schedule, 7 days a week. Like, these guys rarely have any time off away from basketball at all. But Mike Brown is more or less, he's a coach, and he's a really smart basketball mind and a good tactical mind, but he's also become a really good communicator. And, I don't know if father figure is the right word, but just somebody like a life coach, perhaps, like somebody who can talk to these guys and get through to them, because he does have that credibility in a way that like creates the culture that sort of resonated up and down the organization that we've seen this year. Like, Mike Brown is a very good basketball coach, maybe even a great basketball coach, but it's the communication, it's the creating a program, it's creating the accountability that I think has been really important. And I think that's what everybody has bought into, the fact that, like, man, Mike Brown is a guy who forces his team to practice a lot, but there are no like negative residual effects from that. It's not like, man, we're tired of practicing. Like, shut up, Mike. Like, you're not hearing any of that from the players. Like, these guys know they practice a lot, but they also kind of embrace it because they understand that those are the things they need to do to develop as a team, because it's going to lead to winning. And that's what it's done. And Mike Brown deserves a ton of credit, like you said.
Do you have fun with me right here? All right, real quick right here.
How far into that bottle are you over there? Yeah, all right.
Was it that kind of Thursday?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, buddy. You know what it is.
Cheers to you guys. I'm drinking water.
Just, venture off with me real quick. How sustainable do you think this group of Kings players and what they're doing is? Like, is this a one-time thing, or is this in your opinion, the start of something with this group?
So that's why, like, in my opinion, I thought they were smart not to make any drastic moves at the trade deadline, because by keeping this group together and keeping all of your future assets in line, you have a better shot at making this sustainable over the long haul. Like, for them to get a star, say they wanted to get a third star, it's probably costing them Harrison Barnes and Keegan Murray. And sure, you might be better in the long run, but what's it look like 4 or 5 years from now when Keegan Murray is maybe a star for the Toronto Raptors and you got OG Anunoby and you're wondering if this is really the right thing, if you peaked at like making the conference semis or the Western Conference Finals with that group, or can you keep all of your assets and then Keegan Murray turns into a star and then maybe you can use your other assets to turn those into other roster upgrades that you need, right? So to me, I think it was very pragmatic from a long-term perspective for them not to make any of those moves that would have included trading Keegan Murray, because the Kings being where they are, like the draft capital that they give up isn't going to be as valuable as somebody like Keegan, because they're probably not going to draft that high again in the foreseeable future, right? So they certainly have questions going forward, like with Harrison Barnes, with Rashawn Holmes in that contract. But I think look, if I'm the Kings, like I'm really looking at Jaylen Brown in a couple years, right? Like that's the type of player that I know free agency is sort of a taboo thing to talk about in Sacramento, and it's certainly not like considered a destination or whatever. But man, if you're winning and you have the cap space, like you can at least throw your hat in the ring. And so I think that the Kings are setting themselves up by maintaining all of their assets and having it's still a young roster, right? Like with the exception of Harrison Barnes, it's pretty young roster. Domantas Sabonis is 26, De'Aaron Fox is 25, I believe. Like they have time to develop and get even better. And so, if Keegan Murray continues on this trajectory, whether or not they bring back Harrison Barnes is a pretty significant question, but not one they have to answer till after the season. But I do think over the long haul, like what they have going is pretty sustainable because their stars are young. And it's, they can make it work from a cap perspective for now. And I think even down the line, they could potentially have a little bit more flexibility depending on what happens with Harrison Barnes long term. And certainly if they could find a way to figure out the Rashawn Holmes contract and make that go away.
And this is random because somebody in the chat was talking about it's much more attractive place for free agents to come to. I agree, but I meant to ask you this. I'll ask you too, Chris, just real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Standing up to ask this.
Oh yeah, this is big time. The beam's just part of the Lexicon now. Like it's never going away.
It shouldn't. Yeah, no. I vote the beam does not go away.
Never goes away.
No, I like the beam. I think the beam is the rare cool gimmick. I don't know if gimmick's the right word, but the rare cool thing where like fans don't have to buy stuff. And it's about winning. Like it's not about like, hey, buy this thing and be a part of it. It's like, no, just go outside and see it. Like we won a game. Like I think that's cool. It's winning. It's something for the fans. It's free. It's not a marketing campaign to sell shirts or panda hats or whatever. Like I think the beam is cool and it's original and like it's perfect for today's social media culture with memes and everything like that. I think the beam was a great idea.
The people love it too. There was one of Jazz's longtime friends, not a basketball fan at all, and went to go get something to eat downtown, and just came across, oh, the Kings won. Hey, we got to take a picture in front of the beam.
Mm-hmm.
You're watching basketball.
It's unifying. Like, would as many people have gone downtown last night if the beam wasn't there?
Probably not.
Would you have just gone to the arena?
I took a picture in front of the beam.
Yeah, like you took a lot of pictures in front of the beam. I saw all of them.
I do think they need to make it like, I don't know if you've like driven up to Vegas from LA and seen like the Luxor beam from like 20 miles away. Yeah. I think they need to make it like that. I don't know if they can, if the FAA will allow it or whatever, but they need to make it like a super strong beam that you could see from like Davis or something. I think that needs to happen.
That is their next goal. Is we've got the beam. It was a good start. Now we need a brighter beam. This is a playoff team here.
Was piercing the sky last night. Hey, I don't know how much brighter it can get.
Well, it can always get brighter. There's always more money you can put into something. Like, come on. And now we've got playoff money, so it's different. It's a whole different ball game when you got playoff money.
That's true. More money at the gate.
You talked about how this is sustainable and how they could build, and you rightfully so talked about the age of this team and Harrison Barnes and what winds up happening with him and being attractive to free agents. And I think one of the big things that could really influence this team's long-term future is the guy who we think very quietly broke the rookie 3-point record last night in Keegan Murray. Sacramento was talking about it. I don't know how many people outside of Sacramento, we're talking about the accomplishments of Keegan Murray. And there was at some point this season, Chris, I don't remember exactly what point, but I remember Kenny and I both came in here like, yo, what is this dude going to be like next year? Like, what is he going to be like in 2 years? Like, how much better can Keegan Murray become?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to, can he get better defensively? Like, can he be better defensively? Can he get more athletic? Like, I don't know if guys really change their athleticism overall, or maybe he just becomes a good athlete by way, or a good defender by way of just practicing and being more mindful and experienced. But he has the size and the length to be somebody who can guard forwards and centers, I think, at a pretty high level. And the shooting is obviously key. I mean, the key for Keegan is just to be a more dynamic player, and be somebody who can make more plays off the dribble, who can, play make more, pass better, not just be a spot up shooter. Because there's a big difference between somebody like, Pascal Siakam or Chris Middleton and like Tobias Harris, right? Like, you probably don't, I think if you're not optimistic about Keegan Murray, you're probably like, he might just be like the next Tobias Harris, which isn't necessarily a bad player, but not somebody who like
Tobias Harris here.
who's like, yeah, they need the Kings need him to be better than that, right? So I think the ceiling's pretty high for Keegan. Like, he can be, I look at it like his demeanor. Like, I think he could be, I think I've said this to you guys before, like small forward Al Horford, right? Just like steady, of like somebody who plays beyond his years. Like, Keegan can, to me, looks like a guy who can be an Al Horford like presence on a team for a long time. Obviously, Al Horford's a big man, but just, a defensive presence, a strong veteran leader, somebody who just makes the right plays. I think Keegan can evolve into that type of guy. And if he improves his defense, if he improves his playmaking and what he does off the dribble, I know he spends a lot of time working on his handle. Then he could be a really, really multifaceted player for the Kings. And right now, I mean, they kind of just need him to be like that, that spot up shooter more or less, and a guy who can play off the ball. But as time goes on and maybe Harrison Barnes leaves, and at some point Harrison Barnes isn't going to be here, right? So, and they're going to need Keegan Murray to evolve into more of a ball handler, more of a playmaker. So I think that those are the things that he really needs to improve on, is just the defense and the playmaking and ball handling. And I think if he gets there, I mean, if he's going to shoot 40+% from three his whole career, that's like a perennial all-star. And that's a super valuable player who's going to make, $30-40 million a year in his second contract. So that to me is where it starts with Keegan Murray, if he can do those things.
Chris, you're 100% right with everything you said. I was like telling Damien, I was like, let's just play. And I think this is like worst case scenario. Let's just say he's this for the rest of his career. That's still good.
Yeah.
Like, that's not your fourth option, being able to put up 13 points a game or something like that, shoot 40% from beyond the arc. And that's still good. So that gets me even more hyped up for what he could do in his career. I think one of the biggest things, you touched on it, is getting the comfort level and the athleticism just a little bit to be able to be a little better defender, be able to move your feet a little bit better.
Yeah.
If he can do that and, have increment growth on the offensive end, man, the sky's the limit, man.
And the confidence to just attack the lane. And, Mike Brown's talked about this all year with Keegan, like attack the lane off the dribble and go dunk on somebody. Like, he's a good 6'9", 6'10", and he's got plenty of length, but he's just frankly not a great finisher in traffic. And like I think strength, time in the weight room, obviously just being in the NBA and playing that type of ball is going to improve like as time goes on. And I think once he sort of develops that physicality and the killer instinct that might come along with that, you're going to start to see him be more aggressive and be somebody who can have more of an overall game and use his driving as a threat, which could help his outside shooting, because now teams are kind of like, all right, if we can contest his shot, we're going to run him off the 3-point line and force him to go to the lane or force him to try to make a play. But if he can do those things in the years to come, then he becomes a guy who's awfully difficult to guard and is somebody that, like, you think about as one of the better players in the league.
He feels like the perfect Mike Brown player too. Like the disposition and like everything. It's just perfect for Mike Brown, and probably perfect for, I mean, when you think about it, if that's the future of this franchise, Keegan along with Domas and De'Aaron, none of them have like these massive personalities that we so often associate with NBA players. Not to say that they don't have presences, especially, De'Aaron, but those big NBA, like Malik's got a bigger personality than those guys do. You know what I mean? Like the stars of the
absolutely.
team don't have that massive personality, which is great because I love Malik being the personality leader of this team.
It works.
That's my boy.
It works. Early in the season, I think Mike Brown was sort of hesitant to say it, but he alluded to Keegan Murray having a very similar disposition to Tim Duncan. And obviously, Tim Duncan's a Hall of Fame player. Like he wasn't saying that he thinks Keegan's a Hall of Fame guy, but just saying that like the disposition and the way, the fact that he's not a super talkative dude, like that reminded Mike, who coached Tim Duncan. Like Keegan Murray thinks he has a similar personality to Tim Duncan. And that's like ultimately, a basketball team or really any sports team, when you're around guys all the time, like you want a steady personality, somebody who's not going to, be this roller coaster up and down type personality. Like Keegan's very steady. And I think Domas and De'Aaron are the same way. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's all worked for them from a vibes perspective.
Yeah. What do you think they're going to do at the last 2 weeks of the season here? You're not locked in. I'm not going win horse. You're not locked into the three. There is a
stuck
situation.
was the word. You're stuck in the third.
You're not there, right? Like you might need a little help, but you could get to the two. Like I said, we could be looking at a situation after Friday night where they're one game behind Memphis. And they got a San Antonio game on Sunday, and they got the tiebreakers. So there's still a little something to play for, but it's not drastic. Like, how do you think Mike Brown plays this, specifically when you talk about like playing time and maybe sitting guys or anything like that?
Maybe in the back-to-back next week when they go to New Orleans and Dallas, maybe they consider resting some guys on the back end of it. I think this team's pretty intent on trying to finish with the best record possible. And frankly, I don't think they're the type of team that can really afford to just kind of cruise into the playoffs and back in. I think they still have things they need to work on. And I think the things that they need to work on lend themselves particularly to the postseason, right? Like when Boston came in and Milwaukee came in and Minnesota to a certain extent, the thing out of those losses that Mike Brown talked about was defensive intensity and physicality. And, this isn't a physical team, and the playoffs do get more physical. So they'll have opportunities over these last stretch of games that, they could work on those things. They could work on defense and communication and being more physical and all of those aspects of what they need to improve on. So to me, like if I'm the Kings, I'm keeping my foot down on the gas pedal, obviously within reason. And like if guys are banged up, I would definitely be inclined to sit guys because you have clinched. You're more than likely going to be in the 3rd seed. But if you can hop into the 2 seed and then, play a team that's coming off the play-in game or play-in games, I should say, I would embrace that because, like if the Warriors are 6, you'd probably rather play a play-in team than the defending champs. I know you guys have been talking about the Warriors a lot. I have my own opinions on that, which I'm sure you guys don't want to hear about right now. But I think if they can get the 2 seed,
Biderman, friend or foe?
That?
I said friend or foe.
Friend or foe? I mean, I grew up in the Bay Area, man. But I just think if you can get, somehow New Orleans or Oklahoma City, if you can get one of those 2 teams in the play-in rather than Golden State or the Clippers or even Minnesota, like I think you'd rather do that. So I think the Kings are going to keep their foot in the gas pedal, and maybe like with the exception of guys being banged up, they're probably not gonna ease off over this last week or 2.
Hey, why don't you go us and give us those opinions about the Warriors and the Kings potential 1st round matchup?
The Warriors, since Steve Kerr became head coach, have never lost a Western Conference playoff series. So I know Kings fans feel confident, and
Lost the playing
there are
game,
reasons.
didn't
Yeah, yeah.
they lost the playing game. I know that's not the same. I'm cheating. Go ahead.
Right. But since when they have all of their guys healthy, they just don't lose in the Western Conference final or in the Western Conference playoffs. So obviously Andrew Wiggins is a big wild card. And if he's available, that changes their team drastically. I think Wiggins is probably their second best player at this point, pretty comfortably. At least he was in last year's playoffs. But like I just look at it like, the Warriors' road record is what it is, but I'm expecting them to be much better on the road once the playoffs come. And I just
Why?
think why? Because they're experienced. They know what that is. And like they can still win games by getting to a different gear defensively that just a lot of other teams can't get to. And frankly, like I don't think that the Kings have that gear where they can get to and go win a big game defensively, particularly on the road, because there are going to be times like in the playoffs, the Kings are going to have playoff games where they're not going to be able to score 130 or even 120. And there might be games like the other night against Minnesota where they go 5 for 27 from 3. You're going to have to win games other ways. And the Kings haven't proven that they can win that type of game with defense. And so the Warriors, while they haven't done it so much this year, they've proven in the past that they can do it. And I just think like 4-time champs, Steph Curry, like, are you picking against Steph Curry in the playoffs like ever? Like I know who I'm talking to here, but like I just have a hard time.
We ride with
We
Steph.
have a healthy fear of
Yeah. I just have a hard time like the arguably one of the 2 best point guards of all time, the guy who just came off one of the best finals performances ever, is just gonna like all of a sudden be bad in the first round of the playoffs. I don't know. I just think if you can avoid playing the Warriors, if you're the Kings, I think that's probably smart. And obviously, like I said, I'm a guy who grew up in the Bay Area, but I think just the fact that the Steve Kerr led Warriors have never lost a Western Conference playoff series, to me, is just kind of a wild stat that I think might get overlooked a little bit.
It is wild.
Here's Rob Dub, Chris Biderman from 95.7 The Game.
Gosh, that hurts, especially in light of recent events. That hurts.
Oh God, I'm sorry. You're right.
Yeah. And you're right. That is a crazy stat, but I mean, they're not going to do that forever.
No, they're
You know what
not.
I'm saying? Like they're not. They're going to lose. I say this all the time. I'm being a little facetious, but Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is a Hall of Famer. He's not winning anything today in 20. Like at some point, like your pedigree and your resume, it can only get you so far. You got to actually get out there and do it. I don't think
you've watched Steph this year though.
Yeah, Steph Curry scored 50 the other day, and they lost by 15.
But the one thing that Chris said is what we talked about the other day. But when we took Steph out of the equation, it's clear Steph is the number one fear factor in all of this. Mm-hmm. I do feel like they can elevate for defensive possessions. Whether they can play what we consider Golden State Warrior defense for 7 games, 6 games, 5 games, I don't know. Can they do it for 4 minutes? I'm fearful that they can't.
They haven't shown they can do that without Wiggins on the road.
And that's the other massive part about this is
if they don't have Wiggins, that's their second best player and their best probably two-way player.
And we're talking a potential first round series. Andrew Wiggins walking on the floor, just it's going to take some work to convince me that that's going to make a big difference. That's not a knock on Andrew Wiggins. I don't know where the brother is. I hope he's okay. I don't know what he's doing. I know it doesn't sound like he's playing basketball. So he's just going to walk onto the floor and dominate defensively. I'm not going to feel great about that if that winds up happening.
In a track meet?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah. No, it would be a great series. I'm just saying, like, there's 4-time champs.
Chronicles coming to a Chris Biderman and Kyle Madsen. It works perfectly.
Hey, so on the flip side, though, who would you want to see the Kings face if you had your pick? And obviously, we all want to face Dallas, right? We all want to face Dallas.
Yeah,
getting in. All right, so like in that, whoever's in that range, realistically, like who you think would be a good matchup for him?
I mean, it would be Dallas. If OKC got in, I think you wouldn't hate playing them as much as some other teams. Like, I mean, look, it's the playoffs. They're the West, everybody, I'm just looking at the standings right now. Everyone feels like they're underachieving, but they also feel like they could go to another gear and be scary. Like Phoenix obviously could be scary. The Clippers could be scary. The Warriors could be scary. Minnesota has played the Kings as tough as anybody this season. The Lakers have LeBron. The Pelicans, I it's impossible to say what they look like. If Zion comes back, they could be scary. You remember at one point they were the best team in the West earlier this season when they had Zion. So there's I don't think there's an easy answer outside of Dallas, but right now Dallas is 11th and it's not looking like they're going to get in, or at least it's a coin flip that they do get in. But the thing I would say is, like, if you're the Kings, who cares? Like, you gotta win regardless. If you're going to make the Western Conference Finals, you're going to have to beat one of these teams. You're going to have to beat Phoenix. You're going to have to beat Memphis. You're going to have to beat the Clippers. You might have to beat the Warriors. You might have to beat the Timberwolves. So if your goals are to advance, you can't worry about who you get in the first round, because if you get somebody in the second round that you don't like to play, it's like, well, that's the whole thing. If you're trying to eventually win a title, you got to look across to the other team and say, we can beat these guys. It doesn't matter who we get. So the Western Conference is scary because there are so many teams that you think could take it to another gear. We don't know who will, but I don't know that there's like a matchup like, oh, I really want those guys. Like the Clippers, to me, I mean, Ty Lue is a really good coach. And we saw when the Clippers were here, and I think the Kings almost blew that game in the fourth quarter. Like they were D'ing up De'Aaron Fox and forcing the ball out of his hands and trapping him. And like, how are the Kings going to adjust to that? Because they haven't seen that a whole lot this year, right? Like Ty Lue tactically is probably the best coach in the league over a 7-game series in a playoff setting. So like, you obviously don't want to play Phoenix and Kevin Durant. So I just, I've said my piece about the Warriors and the Timberwolves, and I mean, the Lakers will be fun. I could see him taking, like, the Lakers could be, and then, I mean, the Lakers can score inside, which is a big issue for the Kings all year. But there's the point is, it doesn't matter. Like if you want to win, you want to get to the Western Conference Finals, you can't worry about what the matchups are. You just got to go out and beat who's ever in front of
you. Kings can beat all these teams, and just as much as those teams have things that pose problems for the Kings pose problems for every single person in the Western Conference, every single team in the Western Conference.
That's true.
No
disagreement.
No. Chris, don't put that on them.
Oh,
no.
Chris, we appreciate you. Chase Center Chronicles coming soon to a podcast platform near you. In the meantime, you can check out Candlestick Chronicles with Chris Biderman and Kyle Madsen, who will, by the way, be in studio with us tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
Immediately following his lunch with Chris Biderman, Kyle Madsen will be in studio with us tomorrow. Chris, we appreciate you. Have a great road trip, man. We're looking forward to all the coverage, and we'll catch up here pretty soon.
I'm going to try to backhand some food in New Orleans for you.
I have no doubt you'll be successful like that.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you, Chris.
Good to see you.